Welcome to Law Subscribed. This is your dedicated news source for all things subscriptions in the law. My name is Matthew Kurbis. I'm the subscription attorney, and I believe subscriptions can help bridge the access to justice gap and incentivize attorneys to modernize and scale their practice like never before. On this show, I interview lawyers ditching the billable hour and experts who can help attorneys move beyond billing time. Thanks to my sponsors, 650 and Gavel. Links to both in the show notes. More on them later, and use the code LAWSUBSCRIBED when signing up. You get 10% off, and it supports the show. The best way to support the show is to share it with someone you know. This podcast is for educational and entertainment purposes only, and nothing said is legal, ethical, or financial advice. Without further delay, here's the episode. I'm pleased to have with me here today Zane Johnson, aka Matthew Zane Johnson, which we'll get into. First of all, though, Zane, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So before we even get into it, just in case my audience didn't see the post on LinkedIn, which is how we got connected. I said, hey, there's more, I have some more spots for this year's season. And you reached out saying, hey, I'd love to come on. And I was like, all right, time to tell us, what are you doing? And you did. And it's great. And I love it. I can't wait to talk about it. So that's how we got connected. But just in case they didn't see that and look you up and take your law line course or anything, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure. So my name is Zane Johnson. I am originally from Philadelphia, but currently living out in Hawaii. And I run a virtual law practice. So my law firm is MZA Legal. Started it as Zane and Associates back in 2019. That was a mouthful. So we rebranded and now we're just MZA Legal. And really, we're a virtual firm that helps self-funded entrepreneurs build a solid foundation for the future growth of their business. Right. So everything from setting up business entities to drafting and reviewing contracts to helping them understand what their intellectual property is and how to protect it, how to leverage it. Really, I try to be that bridge from step 0 to 1 for entrepreneurs, making those legal services more accessible for folks. And I'm also in the process of trying to figure out how I can build a platform that kind of bridges the knowledge that I have in terms of working with folks who have a criminal record and also working with entrepreneurs, bringing that together and providing resources that really help folks who are in that position to navigate the legal aspects of running a business.
I mean, talk about a niche, right? That is like if that's your marketing, I don't think there's any other lawyer's marketing, are you, recovered criminal? Or are you recovering from having served time and you want to start a business? You learn some entrepreneurial skills, behind bars. I'm the lawyer for you. I mean, there's something there because I know, because I listen to a lot of NPR, that like there are reformed criminals who are starting businesses and doing a lot of good. So I think you got something there, Zane.
I hope so. Fingers crossed. Fingers crossed.
So, well, I mean, obviously you've workshopped that because that's like a good elevator pitch at a Chamber of Commerce meeting or something.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I've done a couple, I think it's interesting when you're a lawyer and an entrepreneur because you're kind of like, it's like you've got these two identities like that you're trying to constantly bring into one being. And so I've done a couple like accelerator programs and coaching programs because and I don't know if you've had this experience, but when I went out on my own, I really didn't know anything about running a business. Like I don't have an MBA. I didn't study business in college or anything like that. So my business knowledge was lacking, we'll say. And so did a couple accelerator and incubator programs. And so over the years, I've had a lot of opportunity to kind of practice that, 30-second pitch and being quick to tell people what I'm working on.
Yeah, I mean, it's good. I could see some coaching all over that, but that's a good thing, because then it's easy to understand what you do. In particular, the self-funded entrepreneurs, like that is not a pitch I've heard before. So many attorneys are like, we want to represent, startups, pre-growth, during growth, raising around, but self-funded entrepreneurs. I mean, that's what you and I are, right? Having our own law. We're self-funded entrepreneurs for attorneys.
Exactly. And I mean, there's so many small businesses out here, so many folks who have an idea, a passion, a hobby that they'd like to turn into a side hustle, and so I think that there are negative aspects about this kind of cult of entrepreneurship that we have going on, but I think that there are a lot of positive aspects about it as well. And it comes from a very positive space because people want to be able to have that freedom. They want to be able to do work that's meaningful to them. And those are the folks that I want to be able to serve at the end of the day.
Yeah. I'm right there with you. I've never put it in the phrase of self-funded entrepreneurs. I tend to say like solopreneurs or mom and pop shops or small business owners because they're not raising venture capital or private equity either,
Yeah. And
Yeah,
well, so I got to be honest. I actually got that term from my marketing guru coach. She doesn't have an actual. I don't have an actual term for her, but shout out to Akia. She's my marketing person over at the Hustle Lab, and she actually was the one who like threw that term out there. And I was like, "Ooh, I really like that." So I think I'm going to run with this. So feel free to use it freely and help spread the term. But I think it even encompasses those folks who are looking to build a startup, but they're still at that pre-seed, kind of phase where they haven't raised any capital yet and they're,
totally.
scrapping it or, they're building out a prototype. And so, even at those stages, obviously entrepreneurs need legal help. And so that's where I really, try to come in.
Right. In particular, your focus on affordability and leveraging the subscription model helps them budget for that. And, they might outgrow you. And that's okay, because if they didn't have you in the first place anyway, they might not even succeed as a business. So really, you're doing good work for the next lawyer that picks up now this giant growth stage company, right?
Yeah, that's what I'm hoping to do. I've actually had clients in the past where, I was kind of helping them bridge that, I've got an idea to getting to that first step and building a base camp business is kind of like I like to put it. But and I've had them say, I've said to them, look, when you get to the point where you're doing some of these things that require a larger team of legal professionals, like I'm probably not gonna be the right fit for you. And like that's okay. When they're like, nah, Zane, like, I trust you. So hard to find people you trust. Like, I'm not letting you go, whatever the case may be. But I'm glad I get to play that role for folks. And I think especially where it can be tough to find professionals or just people that you trust. I try to play that role as someone who is just, I'm here to help you get to the next level. And then from there, I'll be your biggest cheerleader. Or if you want to bring me on as a personal attorney, whatever that looks like, but my goal is to help you get that vision to the next level.
Right, right. And it's great that you're even helping like the high growth startups in the early phase. Like I totally just refer out those clients because I that is not an area that I've decided I'm going to be like take a bunch of CLEs and become competent in. There are attorneys like you, and now I have you on the list too that are doing these things specifically, and you're used to working with these clients, and you're offering affordable monthly prices or annual. We'll get into the model soon, but you're offering a more accessible package of legal services. So I might as well send them to you. Like what I've thought about though, when I do that is I'm like, I'm more the lawyer that like everyday vanilla stuff for your business that has nothing to do with being a high growth startup or raising venture capital. Like I'm good for that. Like
Yeah.
come back to me if you want to, like when you get to that level before and I'm in that stage. And then when you grow to a point where you want to hire full-time in-house counsel, because I'm fractional general counsel, like now you've outgrown me again.
Yeah.
Like that's the stage where I could help you as that fractional general counsel for time. But you got to get there first. So I'd rather send them to an attorney like you, Zane, or like Maria Worley with Start Law to get them set up in Delaware and all that stuff. And review term sheets and all that. Like I'm just, you know what? I could do that. I probably could figure it out, but I'm busy enough as it is, man. And
Yeah.
now I know lawyers like you who are doing it. So the
Yeah.
similarities don't stop there, though. So your first name we mentioned was Matthew, but you picked Zane. Just quickly tell us that story before we get into your business model.
So I'll try to make it as quick as possible because it's part of a, I guess, much longer story. But I will start from the beginning. When I was still in my mother's belly, my family had a group of names that everyone kind of liked, and they voted on them, and they came up with Zane. And so when I was born, though, my parents put Matthew in front of it and then brought me home. And then everyone, and I think my brother, especially as the story goes, everyone was like, no, we're calling him Zane. So growing up, I always went by my middle name. So much so that I remember getting to preschool and one of the preschool teachers teaching me to write my name and telling me that my name was Matthew. And I was confused. And then, got to elementary school, started going by Matthew because it was just easier. But, the teacher says your name, first day of school. And I wasn't going to say, hey, call me by my middle name. So started going by Matthew, Matt. So all through grade school, college was Matt J because there's always another Matt in the class, of course. And then got to law school and they're introducing everyone. And, I was deciding whether I wanted to continue to go by Matt or whether I wanted to go by Zane professionally as a way to, kind of stand out and also, I have a lot of people who know me as Matt, a lot of people who know me as Zane. And, in that kind of introductory, get together, whatever the case may be with the whole class, we're in this big hall and they're like, there are 4 people who have written books and people from 26 countries and 8 Matthews. And I'm like, yeah, I'm going to go by Zane. So that's the short version of the long journey to
Well,
get.
obviously you're not from Chicago, because if you were, you could have gone by MJ, and then
Oh, yeah.
you had that option. I'm from Chicagoland area, so
Yeah, I mean, would going by MJ in Chicago, I feel like that would almost be like, you know,
sacrilegious.
yeah, or like, that's a high bar to live up to, He's like the undisputed GOAT. You gotta be on your P's and Q's if you're going by MJ in Chicago.
Well, it's a good thing LeBron doesn't listen to the podcast. He
Yeah.
said undisputed go. But anyway, that's a different podcast.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, so Zane, I mean, much more recognizable, like as like a standout name, right? Somebody says Matthew in a room of 20 people and half of them turn their heads, right? So
Um,
yeah, I'm a last name first guy, Kurbis, everyone. And because I have the unique spelling in Matthew, people are always, oh, do you go by Matt? How do you spell that? And of course, I spell it with 2 T's just to make things confusing. So Matthew with 1, Matt with 2. So I was like, everyone just calls me Kurbis. Just call me Kurbis. It's just easier. And then I know you're talking to me. But so anyway, getting back into the reason why you're here, like take us through your journey. Did you ever have to bill your time when you were practicing law? What made you want to start your own firm, and what made you want to not bill your time?
So I did build time early on when starting my firm, but I actually come from the nonprofit space in terms of my background. So after law school, I was an AmeriCorps Equal Justice Works Fellow at Philadelphia Lawyers for Social Equity, where all the work that we were doing was expungement work, helping people to overcome the barriers that they face as a result of having a criminal record. I really loved the organization that I was with because it was a small nonprofit. It was started by an attorney whose background was in criminal defense, naturally, but really just noticed that there was an issue and thought about it entrepreneurially and wanted to address it innovatively. And so started holding expungement clinics and, really just created this organization that didn't exist to solve a problem that was not being addressed. And so, after, deciding to go out on my own, I knew I wanted to incorporate fixed fees, unbundling, into my practice, but I didn't quite know how. So I kind of did like a mix. There were some things where I would handle it on a fixed fee basis, things that were, as clear, whether it's, setting up an LLC or registering a trademark, things where it's really, really clear, there's here are the steps I can kind of break down and tell how long it's going to take me to get people through each step. But then things like drafting contracts, I would do on an hourly basis, and I hated it. That was my first experience billing hourly. I think it's easy enough from the work perspective because obviously you don't miss anything in terms of billing because all of the time that you're spending on the matter, you're able to, charge for. And so you're capturing all of the value, at least from your perspective as the attorney. But I just hated the feeling of feeling like I was putting a price tag on my time because I definitely feel like that is my most valuable asset. I can't get that back. And, it also felt like it put me not necessarily at odds with my clients, but the interest isn't always on the same page. I feel like when you're billing hourly versus when you're able to say, hey, here's what I charge, here's what it includes, and you're able to, kind of wrap it up in a nice package. And so I kind of quickly, figured, well, I'm going to have to find a way. And the more experience that I got, more matters that I handled, the more I was able to kind of predict how long things would take, even something like drafting or reviewing a contract. And so really breaking everything down to, fixed fee pricing. And then from there, starting to put together packages that kind of function in the same way that a subscription legal service would.
Right, right. And now, of course, you've also got this thing that you're building that's primarily going to be leveraging the subscription model, right? Do you want to talk a little bit about that before we get back to the fixed fee work?
Yeah, absolutely. And so, with that, I think, one of the things that I started to realize because, I started my practice because I wanted to make legal services more accessible. I've always been very interested in, and I think passionate about the concept of access to justice and how do we find ways to make professional legal services more accessible to everyday people. And I think what I found, I went out to start this firm because I wanted to make my legal know-how accessible to folks, but I found that it's very difficult to price and make your services affordable and still keep the lights on, when it's just you, or even if you have other attorneys, you have 24 hours in a day. And so you've got to, you've got to build anything that requires your time to kind of put it together. You've got to build a pricing model that makes it valuable and worth it to you, and sometimes that's not going to be affordable to everyone that you would like to work with and like to help. And so, about probably a year and a half ago, I got the idea to create some sort of subscription legal platform that really productizes my knowledge, takes what I know, puts it in a place where people can access it on a kind of do it yourself basis, but also kind of acts as a lead in to working with an attorney. And so becoming familiar with some of those things as a new entrepreneur that you've got to think about from a legal perspective. And also starting to understand what does it look like to work with an attorney one-on-one. And so, it tested out like a beta platform of that last year, found that part of the, I think part of the value of being able to create a platform like that is that there's a real great opportunity to build community. And so I think what I realized from that was if I'm going to build a platform like this, I want it to be based around serving the needs of a particular niche or a particular community so that it's not like everyone just kind of in here and the only thing that we have in common is that we all run a business or have a side hustle, but that we have some other sort of, thing in common that we can kind of bond over, connect over, and, build community around.
Yeah, the community thing is one of the benefits of having a subscription model. If you can lean into that, and if it's quasi legal but not like actual legal services, it's a heck of a lot easier to do that because you don't run into the issues of even that somebody's hired you as an attorney could be protected by attorney-client privilege, right? So you got to be careful sometimes with stuff like that. But the Counsel for Creators law firm comes to mind because they really built community around their $99 a month subscription, which, I don't know, at the time of publication, it's more than that now. But, they have just one subscription and it's about building that community amongst creatives, right? So I think that their model has been pretty successful over almost a decade now. And so, if they could do it for that, I think you could probably do it for this, right?
Yeah. And, I settled on, well, not necessarily settled, but I've always kind of been looking for a way to combine that knowledge and expertise of working with folks who have criminal records with that knowledge and expertise of working with entrepreneurs. Because in my experience, working with folks who have criminal records, first off, I think there's obviously a lot of stigma, right? And so, and one thing that a lot of people don't realize is that having a criminal record doesn't necessarily mean someone served time or even been convicted, right? So if I'm walking down the street and I fit the description and I get arrested, that's going to create a legal record that then lives and, someone can look at and get the wrong impression about who I am, even if I went into court the next day and the judge was like, this clearly isn't the guy, right? And so the case gets dismissed. And so, but what a lot of those folks experience obviously is discrimination in the, work context and not being able to find employment or being underemployed. And so a lot of people either start side hustles or start a business because they want to, they want to find a way to obviously make money, but also do something that is fulfilling for them. And so, I think it's a nice way to, kind of combine those two and meet the need. And then also obviously, like I said, because there are a lot of folks who want to start businesses, I think that there's definitely a market out there. So I haven't launched it yet. I'm still in the process of, I haven't relaunched it, still in the process of kind of bringing everything back together. But I think it's going to be some sort of mix of, you subscribe at this level and you just have access to all the resources that are DIY. And then you subscribe at this level and you have access to all those resources and then some level of access to working with Zane, whether it's like a group workshop or, a once a year you get a consultation or whatever it may be. So still kind of figuring those things out. But, what I learned in kind of the beta launch last year, I'm definitely carrying forward those lessons to apply to what I'm going to do as I launch this second iteration of that.
Right, right. I can't help myself. I'm an attorney. I'm analogizing, right? I analogize to the Counsel for Creator guys, and now I'm thinking like it's kind of like a Hello Divorce type productization thing, but instead of for divorce, that might lead to working with an attorney. It's you're starting a business, and it might lead to working with an attorney. Now, of course, the niche you're focusing on are those entrepreneurs who have criminal records. But I think, I mean, can anybody just sign up for it? Or would they have like a separate instance of like, okay, you don't have a criminal record, so you're a separate community, but it's all the same stuff? I mean,
Yeah.
maybe, right?
Yeah, so like these are the like difficult questions to answer when you're like an idea person because you I've thought about that as well, and I think it's a great idea. The tough part about it is like being one person. It's tough enough to execute one project. Trying to execute like a few at once is, just a trap for folks like us who like to be creative and like to create new things. So I think what I've kind of tried to do, because it's an idea that I think is portable in the sense that like you can build this sort of platform and apply it to a lot of different situations, a lot of different niches. And there are like other attorneys who are doing this, like the Legal Miga, Taylor. I'm not sure if you're familiar with her or not, but she has a platform, the Legal Miga Library, I think it is. That is, she's killing it. She's definitely someone that I look at as, who is changing the game. Liku. I'm trying to think. I think the name of her platform that she launched at the beginning of this year is called Precedent. So there are other folks who are doing this type of work and building these sorts of platforms. And I think, you know, building community around it really, and a lot of times kind of through their personality and their own personal branding, which both of them do a great job of doing. So, but for me, I think one of the things that I'm going to try to do to kind of incorporate this just generally into the work that I do in the practice is really take pieces of that platform and apply it to the LLC formation packages that I offer. So to create like a separate, not sure what the brand kind of looks like, whether it's a separate brand or whether it's under my law firm, but create a separate platform where when you sign up for LLC formation services, we're going to set up your LLC, but you're also going to have access to this platform that gives you access to specific tools and resources and templates that others don't have access to. So a lot of different ways to go with it. And I think that's kind of the fun part about where we sit right now is as attorneys offering subscription and fixed fee services is that we, have the opportunity to create and see what works as long as we've got the courage to try to do that.
Right, because we don't have to worry about, oh, I spent an hour on that. That was $500 or whatever,
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
So longtime listeners know I'm a true solo, just leveraging technology and automations and AI and all that. Are you a true solo too, or do you employ some staff or fractional staff?
I guess I would definitely consider myself a true solo. Like I said, I have my marketing, I guess marketing director, you could call her. Her name's Akia, and she's great. She runs a business called the Hustle Lab. And, so while she officially helps me with marketing, she's a small business owner herself, a solopreneur, and, helps me with kind of keeping up to date on things like tech and, how to think through conversations with clients around sales and website design and all those different things that as solopreneurs, we're wearing all these different hats. So we're thinking about all these different things. But other than her, it really is just me. I had an intern last semester and the semester prior to that. So there are some folks who come and go in terms of having a team, but I'm the only one dedicated to this full time.
All right, so I'm gonna have to do a search on this to see if anyone said this before, because you just gave me a great idea, and it's the future is fractional. And what I
Yeah.
mean by that is, we're fractional CLOs, chief legal officers, or fractional GC. That you're the person you're working with, your marketing director, she's your fractional CMO, chief marketing officer, right? So
Mhm.
like the future is fractional. It's a fantastic business model, and subscription works amazing for it.
Yeah. Yeah. And she's got me on a subscription for the marketing as well. So it's like, it all, yeah. Yeah. I'm trying to get I left my accountant now. I'm trying to get him on that wave too. I'm trying to work out a solution so I can pay him, monthly or quarterly a subscription. And, I'm trying to convince him. I think accountants and lawyers, it's a lot harder to convince them to try new things than it is, marketing folks or, folks who do some other stuff. But
Yeah.
yeah, I think, yeah, what you said, I agree with it 100%.
I've had now two guests on the show who are CPAs for lawyers, and they offer subscription, but like they are way up market. They're for larger firms than you and
Yeah.
me. You know what I'm saying?
Hmm.
Like what
Hmm.
they're charging a month is like, I'm not charging my clients that much per month.
Uh-huh.
Um, so, but therefore it's for much, it's not even for much, but like for small firms that actually have a number of attorneys and staff people, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, fractional CFO. I mean, it's a
Yeah.
thing. It's
And I
definitely a
mean,
thing.
I think it's all a journey, right? Because and I'm sure that this probably holds true for you as well. But I think for me, like I mentioned earlier, where I'm at now, it's kind of it's I've had to go through kind of 4.5 years of learning to kind of get to the point where I feel very clear about what I do, who I do it for, and the value that it brings. And so it's and everyone's got their own kind of path to walk on that as in terms of being small business owners and sort of figuring out what works for them. And so, starting a subscription practice in whatever field isn't going to work for everyone. But, I definitely think it has benefits for those who are willing to, kind of explore it. And I think the ultimate benefit and, part of the goal is trying to build a model that you can then show to other folks and then, kind of open up another, avenue of business for yourself, which I know some other attorneys have done. So, hopefully it leads to that kind of having a eureka moment. But
I would love to, and I've even talked to Ron Baker about this. Can't remember if it was actually on the recording or not that went out with his episode, but I think every single business can benefit from subscription or membership model. I think we even talked about like, can a funeral home do like a
wow,
subscription model, right? And I have an answer
wow.
for that, and it can. Because like, what is the value, right? What's the benefit that you're trying to
Mhm,
get? And it might be like, they partner with like health and wellness companies to do a joint subscription, because it's like the benefit you get from subscribing to us is we want to keep you out of here as long as
mhm.
possible. But then when it is time for you to come here, as long as you're a member, you have a plot or whatever, right? Like, so I think you could always workshop it and find a way that everyone benefits from, because you benefit because you live longer, because you get all
Mhm.
these other subscription benefits that help you live longer,
Yeah, yeah,
so I think there's always a way. There's always a
yeah.
creative way to do a subscription. For
Um,
my,
y-
oh, go ahead,
I
go
I
ahead.
was I was just gonna cut in and say you'd have to find some great salespeople for that. Like, it's hard enough to get people, when I talk with attorneys who do estate planning, it's hard enough to get people to do a will, so getting them to, I think, have that conversation about like, subscribing to your funeral home and getting your burial plot together. But I think, that's the sort of thinking where it can make sense for anyone, like you said, because there are a lot of different services that you can kind of bring in, bundle together, and create something that folks are going to find value with.
Right.
So,
You get gym membership, you get your supplements, you get your meal plan thing, like I don't want to name drop any of them, but they send you the meals ahead of time. We've been
mm,
doing it lately. It's like grown up Legos. It's great. It's like
yeah,
Legos with food. And it saves so much time. And so like the meal prep kits, like you get all that stuff when you subscribe to the funeral home, because you're going to be healthy and you're going to stay out of the funeral home later. But when you do die, we got a spot for you. I think I have to stop practicing law and go open a subscription funeral home.
yeah.
But which brings me back to the earlier point that I want to ask you a little bit about it is, when you're a solopreneur like we are, you gotta sort of be a generalist, right? You gotta wear all the hats. You can outsource it, outsource the financial, outsource the marketing, and you start to outsource as you grow, and that's important. But you still, like, you were doing it before you were had the cash flow to outsource that kind of stuff. So do you
Yeah.
consider yourself like a generalist, jack of all trades? Like, is that something you identify with?
Not to an extent. I think within the niche and within the audience that I try to serve, the answer is yes,
Hmm.
because I'm working with other entrepreneurs. A lot of them are solopreneurs as well, who don't have the experience. This is their first business. And so they don't just need the legal help, they need someone who can help coach them along, help them solve just general problems about, how do I approach this? Who do I talk to? I think one of the things that I often end up helping entrepreneurs with is just like making connections to other professionals who can help them in other areas. A lot of times that's a tax professional. It could also be a marketing professional. It could be to help someone with web design. I just had a client reach out to me this morning actually and text me and say, "Hey, do you know anyone who designs apps?" And so, for a lot of entrepreneurs, it's just, I think, being that confidant. So in that way, I'm a generalist. But I think when it comes to the law, I try to stick to my, stick right in my comfort zone.
Right.
because I think as a solopreneur, you've got so many things to worry about. Like you said, you're wearing so many hats as a business owner. The more that you have to worry about when it comes to understanding, keeping up with, and knowing the law, it just becomes too much to sort of manage. And I know that from experience because when I went out on my own, like I said, I didn't know anything about running a business. And I tried to be that generalist. I was like, I'm going to be this person who kind of, sits here and is a bridge over the access to justice gap. And then I got into doing things that I figured out I didn't like that much, like family law. Like I did a custody case, I did a child support hearing, didn't like it at all. Figured out that I'm not made for litigation, and especially in that context. So from there I kind of niche down, but I think that's important as a solo attorney is to figure out what your niche is in the law. One, because it gives you less to focus on so that you can also be focused on building your business. But two, I think as the saying goes, the riches are in the niches. And so being able to speak directly to your prospective client and offer a service that's going to, solve a pressing need for them.
When I went solo, I pivoted from mostly litigation to a transactional only practice. I did not have a database of documents to automate. That's why a business and employment legal document database and automation tool like 650 is super useful. I can rely on the quality of the documents in 650's database since they're putting excellent legal minds to work curating and updating their documents and automations over time. When you're not billing by the hour, outsourcing and efficiency matters, and 650 can help you scale your practice to get high quality documents drafted in less time. Use the code LAWSUBSCRIBED at 650.com and when being onboarded to get 10% off. If you're not a business and employment attorney or you have your own documents that you'd prefer to use, then my next sponsor, Gavel, is the automation tool for you. Gavel allows you to build shareable, client-facing workflow and document automations. In other words, Gavel helps you create a legal practice where attorneys can monetize the value they bring clients in productized form and scale via subscriptions and flat fees. Use the code LAWSUBSCRIBED at gavel.io to get 10% off an annual subscription. There's no one right way to automate and scale your practice, but with one or both of my sponsors, 650 and Gavel, you can take your subscription law firm to the next level. Links to both in the show notes. Now back to the show. Yeah. I mean, always sound advice, not advice that I follow with a broad brand name like Subscription Attorney LLC for my firm, but it is sound. And yeah, like I think you hit it, right? Like I even as a practitioner, I know my limits. Like I see you do the business and the trademark stuff, which has some natural overlap, but because I'm doing so many more broad, just contractual things, when somebody needs IP help, I just don't even touch it.
Mhm.
If they're starting a business and I'm helping them do that, which I also do, they have, I can help advise them around brand and trademark considerations. But when they're ready to do a search and register a trademark and all that stuff, I'm referring to an IP attorney. Like I know my
Mhm.
limits still, but
Mhm.
I'm very much in that generalist mindset from a business owner perspective. I think that's a
Yeah.
good segmentation of, yes, there's the generalist lawyer, which don't do if you could avoid it or limit your doing it. Like I do mile wide, inches deep. Like if something gets more
Mhm.
than, I do a lot of practice areas, but if it gets more than a few inches deep, I've hit my generalist limit. But then as
Yeah.
business owner, I am a massive generalist. Like I will
Yeah.
do everything, right? So I think it's a great distinction that you pointed out. I do want to steer us back though towards the fixed fee work that you're doing with the law firm in particular, because I mean, I'm looking at your website and like the practice areas you're doing, right? Business formation, contract creation, trademark in particular, screams subscription to me. So like why, like I know you said you package some things in a way that's kind of like a subscription, but tell me and the audience more about that and like why you're still at least putting yourself out there as I'm a fixed fee flat fee attorney as opposed to subscription.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, what you just said about a lot of the services lending themselves nicely to trying a subscription service. I'm there. If I'm being like completely honest though, and I try to be pretty honest and transparent about myself, about my business, is there's like this fear and kind of mental block still. And I've talked with Chris over at Council for Creators, and it's it's still like this mental block of like, even in talking with him, like, so how does it work? How do you make sure that like people aren't like if they have access to call you whenever, how do you make sure that like they're not calling you whenever? Or if you're saying you're gonna, respond to all of their emails, how do you make sure that you're not inundated with emails so that you can respond to them while also taking care of the other, 10 things on your to-do list for the day. And so I think a lot of it is just still not quite being comfortable with, I think, offering subscription services that require me to provide some sort of like one-on-one service. And so I think that's a lot kind of what led to my thinking of, if I want to build a subscription model, I want to try to build it as something where I'm productizing the knowledge so that people can access it when they want to. And then, kind of treating it as a bridge to working with me through the flat fee services. But that being said, there are some of those practice areas, particularly when I think about some of the areas where I'm missing out on serving some of the needs that clients have, such as trademark, right? I kind of more or less fell into doing trademark work because I had clients who really wanted to register trademarks, and they valued the relationship that they had with me more than necessarily working with someone who had done it before. And they said, Zane, well, I trust you. I, trust that you're honest. I trust that you're going to give me good advice, and I trust that you're going to be able to figure it out. And so my first few trademark clients, that was a relationship. And that's how I kind of got into doing trademark work. It wasn't like this, like I'm passionate about intellectual property. But I say that just to say, I've noticed now that obviously I've got clients who I've registered trademarks for who need trademark monitoring services, and that's something that I could easily offer as a subscription that I'm not yet. So there's a lot of, I think one of the things that I've had to become comfortable with as a solo attorney is at times leaving things be so that I can focus on things that need to be tightened up now in order for me to be able to focus my attention on kind of expanding those services, right? So, for me, I'm just in a space right now where I'm trying to incorporate some more things, particularly around marketing, particularly around reaching more people, getting in front of more audiences. But, those other services in particular, kind of building out subscriptions around them is definitely something that I see in the future for my firm.
All right, I feel like I have to get close to the mic for this one. Well, welcome to Subscription Therapy with Matthew Kurbis on the Well Subscribed podcast. We're about to break through this barrier, these limiting beliefs that Zane has about subscription. All right, everybody, you got me. Okay, all right. Back to regular speaking. But yeah. Let's do some subscription therapy.
What?
I think if it. I think you might be thinking of, and correct me if I'm wrong, that like there's so much manual stuff that you have to do to like manage and have a subscription. Is that like part of the concerns that you have, is all the extra work managing that and setting it up and stuff is going to be?
So I think the main thing that I'm afraid of at this point is starting something and not finishing it, or starting something, seeing it through, and then realizing that I did a bunch of work and it's not leading me to anywhere that's necessarily productive. I think those are probably the biggest fears.
Yeah. I mean, on your website, there's a link that says see pricing, and it's got this menu of pricing, which, congratulations. You're in the small set of attorneys like myself who actually like have a menu of pricing. So you're there in the club, and man, these are great prices. I mean, if I'm a consumer, like this is super competitive for like if I did forget about the quality, because I'm sure the quality's there, but like I mean, I'm a believer that legal services are largely fungible. Like there's diminishing returns to, okay, I know how to do an operating agreement.
Yeah.
Like I mean,
Yeah.
come on. So like there's so much here, and it's all really good prices already. But it's one of those things where like I'm also offering really good prices,
Mhm.
but I make them subscribe to $20 a month first.
Mm.
Like I take the Costco approach.
Mm.
In order to have the privilege of getting the deals at Costco, you must first subscribe to Costco, right?
Mm.
And I make it something de minimis, like $20 a month. And so it's something that they could easily wrap their heads around. And look, I don't care. Like I think I've seen another law firm that's like, we charge like, cause I charge $19.99 a month, and they were like, they just charge $19 a month. And it's like, okay, fine. No, but like that's the whole point, is like, let's try to inspire more people to do it. I think their execution is very different than mine, and I'd be curious to have them on the podcast. And I'm working on that. But in any event, like you find something de minimis that isn't necessarily like, it's not meant to be a revenue generator for you. I
Mm.
certainly think you can, in light of all this stuff, all these prices that you list, fractional GC on a subscription, if a business wants to pay you $1,000 a month or something to like just literally take all the legal stuff off their plate. I mean, you cap it at projects. Like that's what I learned. That was one of my hard lessons was, you get so many projects a month. And what's a project? A letter, a contract, an agreement, whatever, right?
Mhm.
And my pricing is segmented for like solopreneurs, freelancers, or businesses because the
Mhm.
types of contracts are going to be really different. I'm going to have much longer, more complicated contracts with like legit small businesses. So that's why the pricing starts at $2,500 a month. But for solopreneurs, for freelancers, you know, 300 or 1,000, depending on like where you're at in your solopreneurship, like those are going to be much easier contracts for me to get through for them, right?
Mhm.
Maybe somebody didn't pay, so I'm sending that demand letter. That's a project, right? And it's super simple. And if I need to do a quick research thing, that's a project. So I just very loosely define project, and that's what they're capped at, and that's why I have at least 2 subscription tiers. I'll do custom packaging. But you have at least 2 subscription tiers. Okay, you keep going over 3 projects, a month. So I have to charge you this $50 a page for every time you go over that.
Mhm.
Maybe it makes sense for you to just go up to the next subscription level. So we don't have to charge you that a la carte pricing. And that's how you get them up to the next subscription level, right? And so like your prices are already so good. I think requiring some kind of like de minimis subscription price based on the market that you're trying to serve in order to get access to these fantastic prices is great. Now, what you might want to do, I think you shouldn't actually offer this, but you could compare. You could say my prices are going up, and they could go up like $50 each thing, just a little bit. If you want access to my better prices, you could sign up as a subscriber. Right now, that's more to manage. So like depends, you have to figure out how you want to take care of something like that. Some lawyers do that, some don't. Jason Foscolo, the food lawyer, has comparison stuff on his website. I think he just compares his rates to the billable hour. But like, there's some comparison that you might be able to do where you don't actually offer the more expensive pricing because you make everyone subscribe. Like, this is what other lawyers would charge you for these things. But once you subscribe, here's what you get access to, right? So I think
Mhm.
that's an option for you. And it's so easy to set up. I mean, the technology this day, you just set it up. It's an automation. They subscribe, and then they're on there. You're not going to have a much legal tech that's going to help you do something like that. But
Mhm.
there's some, but not a lot. And so
And
like, that's just my thought process. Like I see so much potential for subscription here. And realistically, like your other concern. So that was one concern. Another concern you had was the calling whenever, right? So I see you're already integrating what is it, Lawmatics with your website.
yeah. Yeah.
So with Lawmatics, I have to imagine, I don't use them, I use Calendly, but it's a
Mhm.
similar integration thing. But Lawmatics has more CRM features than Calendly does. But with
Mhm.
Calendly, what I could do is I set limits on like the scheduling availability. So like the scheduling time on my website for introductory calls is different from the entry level subscribers that get access to only a very specific segment of my day to schedule capped 15-minute calls at a time.
Mhm.
So they can't just call me whenever. They could schedule calls with me whenever I'm available, and they have an
Mhm.
unlimited ability to do that kind of a thing. And if I can't solve their problem for them in 15 minutes, then they can schedule another call. But usually what it is it's, oh, one of my flat fee services that I offer is what you need help with. And since you're
Mhm.
already paying me every month, you're calling me when you're
Yeah.
ready to do this thing. Oh, you got that NDA from that other person that you want to maybe do business with. Well, good. I charge $99 to look at that for you and advise you on it. And so they're going to come to you because they've already paid you for that month. So they're going to take advantage of you and they're going to schedule that call. So they're not calling you to like get a bunch of free legal advice. You've got
Mhm.
all your services priced. You're done
Mhm.
with the hardest part. Now you just got to get them on like, okay, they get their unique link from Lawmatics, their unique scheduling calendar that's just for that subscription level. And for my higher paying subscribers, they get access to basically my whole calendar whenever I'm available. I use
Mhm.
the link in Calendly to set up those automations and barriers. So you just cap the amount of time they could talk to you. And that's how you solve that problem. Are you less worried about it now?
I mean, first of all, I'm like blown away by the business model because I think that's so like genius in terms of, what you're saying in terms of making people pay $20 a month to really bring them into your orbit and doing that like directly through your law firm. Like that was kind of the idea that I had with the platform initially. And so I really love that idea of, you bring people into your orbit in that way. I'm curious what software, what like technology you use to kind of put all that together outside of like scheduling, but in terms of some of the other things that you mentioned and what you're offering within your subscription, like what technology do you use to help make it all go?
Yeah, and I will definitely share with you my deck that I use because I do a CLE on this too, and I've done it with Law Line as well. So we're co-faculty on Law Line
Very
at Tech
good.
Show. So I'll share my deck with you where it literally lists every single piece of technology you could possibly use to do this type of stuff. What
Mhm.
I'm using is Sweet Dash integrated with Stripe.
Okay.
And Sweet Dash is like a white label client portal software that's also a blank page. So you have to customize your client portal. It's all no code. You could code if you know how to
Yeah.
do it. But there's some templates you could use. It's dirt cheap compared to legal tech. And you can
Okay.
turn on a bunch of settings that make it HIPAA compliant, two-factor authentication required login, and all that stuff, right?
Okay.
And so you set up your pricing, your subscription levels, your flat fee stuff all in there. So it's all saved. So you just click, click, boom, boom, invoiced for flat fee stuff. But for the subscriptions, you set up these like workflows, like onboarding forms. And
Mhm.
so if you could just go to my website and click on any one of my like subscribe here at this level, and you'll
Mhm.
see it's just like an intake form, like I'm sure Lawmatics or whatever has people fill in their information. They click on it, they get an email sent to them that says, okay, thank you for subscribing. Please create your account. And when they sign in and create a password and turn on two-factor authentication, which I might have as suggestive and maybe not mandatory because I got some pushback for some older, less tech savvy clients, though I still try to push them towards two factor.
Yeah.
And then as soon as they're in the portal, they are immediately prompted to pay the invoice. All this has been automated. Like
Mhm.
I set up the workflow onboarding things. I from some drop down menus, like in a no code tool,
Mhm.
super easy to figure out. And Sweet Dash has a bunch of FAQs if you can't figure it out. And then it's all automated. They pay the bill. It's all the links are on there. Sure, I spent a few weekends, building stuff out before I left the last practice to start this new one, and that's non-legal tech. And
Yeah.
that's like the vast majority of what powers my practice. Then in the client portal, they have access to their Calendly links that gives the
Mhm.
availability, access to a list of pricing, which is also just on my website. And they just message me in the client portal when they need something or schedule a call, and we take it from there. So it's like my tech stack is like pretty low lift. That being
Yeah.
said, there's a lot of legal tech tools that are coming around with that type of stuff, like
Mhm.
Fidu Legal, which
Mhm.
Kim Bennett, I don't know if you know Kim,
Yeah.
I don't know if you've come
Yeah.
across her stuff. She does a lot of teaching around this too. And Fidu is a company you could pay them. I think right now it's like $99 a month, and they'll
Mhm.
like turnkey solution all this stuff for you.
Mhm.
So if you wanted to pay a little bit more and have a legal first platform, that's probably the best place you could do this stuff. They integrate with Confido Legal, which is
Mhm.
another place that you could kind of just power your subscriptions through Confido Legal if you really wanted to. They used to be Gravity Legal, and I use them for my trust accounting anyway because I already had Stripe and Sweet Dash integrated. And I think some of these platforms, like I think Smokeball is coming around on allowing you to do some subscription pricing, or I think it's like payment plans, but you could kind of hack it to do it.
Pretty good. Yeah.
Filevine I know is working on this too to like hack payment plans to like do subscription. So some of them are coming around. Clio integrates with Fidu, so that's like how they take care of that. But I mean, I'm paying $135 annually for Sweet Dash, so it's like
Yeah.
it's a no brainer
Yeah.
in terms of
Wow.
price. It's not as beautiful as Fidu. Fidu is a beautifully designed client
Mhm.
portal software. But you know what? For me, I'm not charging my clients enough to use
Mhm.
fancier software.
Uh-huh. Well, that's awesome, man. I appreciate you kind of breaking that down because I think probably a lot of that fear is just like lack of like being able to see it clearly, right? And so, that difficulty in sort of seeing like, okay, I see what this subscription service could look like, but I'm not sure how it kind of works under the hood. I feel like that's one of those things, and I'm glad that you're so open about being willing to just go out there and kind of share how you built it and what's under the hood.
Yeah, seriously, Zane, we're gonna have you back on in 6 months to talk about how your subscription model is going. Even if it looks exactly like mine, I don't care.
Okay.
Seriously, seriously. So I've got just like three more questions for you.
Sure.
One is I see here on this page for your pricing that you have like Philadelphia only, for example, for expungements, where presumably you have to go into court and stuff. So how are
Yeah.
you handling like the multi-jurisdictional practice situation when it comes to like just business law, which different attorneys have different opinions about? So I want to know what yours is.
That's one that I'm, I think still learning about multi-jurisdictional in terms of how I want to treat it. I'm very cautious. So I will, obviously I do trademark work. So that's something that I'll handle for folks regardless of where they're at. But when it comes to, drafting a contract, when it comes to setting up a business entity, those are things that I tend to shy away from. So like I said, like I'll work with startups, but if a startup wants to form in Delaware, that's something where I'll say, okay, let's get you a Delaware-based attorney. And like I said, like as you said, actually, I've come across other attorneys who are like, older attorneys who are like, if it's, and it's funny to me too, because it's like, I'm like new and I'm trying to be super cautious. I don't want to, you know, I remember starting out my firm and it's like every day I'm like, is this going to be the case or the matter that loses me my law license? And I talk to older attorneys and they're like, oh, if I'm not going into court, it's not practice of law. So I'll, do work anywhere, and so I definitely, don't think that I'll ever be at that point where I feel that loose about multi-jurisdictional practice, but I'm still sort of navigating it because I think that, obviously what's defined as a practice of law, like there is no clear definition of that. It's a very blurry line. It's open to interpretation. And I think that oftentimes that leads us to, be fearful or not innovate in ways that we could that would be really helpful for consumers. And so I try to be innovative and sort of, what I'll tell folks from other states is, look, we can schedule a consultation. I'm always here to help you strategize around how you solve legal problems, because I recognize that, like, if you're reaching out to me from Delaware, now I'm in Hawaii, and the neighbor up the street wants to start a nonprofit, and my neighbor next door, has a photography business. And if they ever come to me and say, hey, I've got questions, I'd be more than happy to sit down with them and kind of talk through, here are the general legal principles. Here's how you think through some of these things. Happy to look over a document, whatever the case may be. And then, maybe even help them find an attorney, which is another business model, which I'd like to explore at some point when I have the time, is like, what would it look like to kind of be like a legal Sherpa who helps to, lead people around to the right lawyer for the right situation. I know that's like a non-answer in a sense, but the reality is I'm still sort of figuring out exactly how to navigate it. And I really take it on a case by case basis to kind of figure out what does this person need? And is there any value that I can provide? And if not, who could I kind of pass them along to?
Yeah, yeah, we take a very similar approach. I'm doing a lot of things that are risky in terms of my business model already.
Yeah.
I'm not
Yeah.
gonna I'm gonna be a little risk averse in some other areas like
Exactly.
multi-jurisdictional practice, right? Like I've been told, well, it's administerial. That's just why LegalZoom and what's the other one? Northwest Registered Agent. They
Yeah.
can
Yeah.
register businesses anywhere. It's like, yeah,
Yeah.
but they're not law firms with a law license. I have a law
Right.
license. Like I might be
Exactly.
engaged in unlicensed practice of law. I don't know. It's not worth it. There's so much latent legal market. Like our prices, there's so much latent legal market, and right where I'm licensed, I got
Mhm.
plenty of business to
Yeah.
get to. Why do I
Yeah.
need to do Delaware law stuff, right?
But it is, I do think that that's the crazy part about how the ethical rules end up hamstringing attorneys, is because you have companies and you have people who aren't attorneys who feel comfortable providing these services in any state at any time. Whereas because, there's the unauthorized practice of law, but they're not under the same microscope that we're under. And,
Right.
while we're, probably the right people to be doing this for folks, a lot of times we're, afraid to, kind of step into new lanes and do new things because we're under that scrutiny. And so, it ends up kind of being one of those things that really, I think ends up harming consumers at the end of the day in terms of what their options are.
Yeah. Last sort of substantive question for you here on today's interview, Zane, because I'm definitely going to have you back on the show in the future. And that is, if you look around at our profession, and if you look at the past guests of my podcast in particular, you see that those innovating on the business model, those ditching the billable hour and doing things like what you're doing, are dominated by women attorneys, attorneys of color. And so my question for you is, why do you think that is? And why are you so darn good
Wow.
at it?
Wow. Wait, so can I ask you really quick, how did you make that observation? Because I've made that observation too. And I'm curious, is it just something that you like stumbled across? Was it a eureka moment? Were you talking to someone else and they were like, have you ever noticed? Or
So in doing my research to open up my own shop from this with the subscription model right away,
Mhm,
um, I just sort of came across that it was like one or two white dudes doing it. And
mm,
like they were still kind of billing time, like it wasn't a true innovation. And like
mm,
all the other attorneys doing it were women attorneys or attorneys of color.
mm,
And since I'm very involved in the American Bar Association, at least at the time of recording,
mhm,
I'm always reading the reports on the profession that they come out with. And even though, and the most recent report, I'm not sure if it's from 2020 or 2021 data, but that there are more women going to law school than men. There are more attorneys of color going and graduated from law school than ever before, but the leadership at big law firms are still not women and still not attorneys of color, right?
Yeah.
So the system's broken. So I have
Right.
that knowledge and awareness, right? And plus, when I was so I saw that stuff. Then when I was doing interviews for the show, it's like, yeah, now there are more white guys doing it than there were before. Some of them inspired by the podcast, but still, like, just look at my guest list of lawyers who are doing something innovative, and that it's just like it's staring me in the face.
Yeah.
And so I try not to, I'm a white guy, so
Yeah.
like I don't want to be the one who's talking about that. Like, give it to the people and get your perspective on it where it's coming from you. You're going to have more insight than I am. I'm just an observer of that.
Yeah, I mean, so I can only speak from my perspective in terms of as an authority, and I think that for the rest of us, like I think anyone can have an opinion or thoughts on it, and so I definitely, whatever your perspective is on it as well, I definitely encourage you to feel free, like sharing that just in general, because it's something that I've noticed as well, and I've thought about it a little bit. I know for me, when I went to law school, didn't really know what I wanted to do in terms of the practice of law, but I knew I wanted to help people, and I knew I didn't want to do big law. I just knew that that wasn't going to be an environment where, uh, in terms of my mental and emotional well-being, it wouldn't be an environment that I would fit into. So I went the nonprofit route, but I always had this entrepreneurial spirit, and I wanted to. One of the biggest motivating factors for me, like when I say I wanted to help people, was going to law school, and almost as soon as like I get into law school, now everyone's calling me with their legal questions. Like my grandma wants me to put something in a trust so because she heard she can avoid probate, and my cousin wants to know, does he have to pay the landlord because the sink's not working and the landlord won't come fix it, so on and so forth. And it really just kind of helped me to realize, in a different way, that everyone has these legal issues, but they don't necessarily know where to go for help with those legal issues. And so that's what really led me to wanting to create something that catered to and focused more on everyday people and meeting their needs, and providing services at a price point that they could actually work with and wouldn't have to take out a loan to try to work with an attorney. But I think, like, my perspective on kind of like larger, like why I think it's more women, why I think it's more attorneys of color who are innovating in this way, I think a lot of it just has to do with creating space where we feel embraced rather than necessarily just accepted, right? And where you're able to be your full authentic self, and also able to, I think, express your expertise in a way that isn't necessarily welcome in spaces where the conventional wisdom is kind of already set, so to speak, right? And so I think creating your own practice allows folks who may feel marginalized or may feel like their voice isn't heard, or they're not seeing folks who are speaking from their perspective in leadership positions. It allows people to have that opportunity to create that space to talk and to create that space to be heard, to become leaders, and then ultimately, create their own table that, other folks have to come to and then sit at to kind of, hear about what they're learning, or figure out how they, just how they figured out how to innovate in a specific way. And so, really just creating that space for folks to bring out their expertise and innovation that isn't necessarily welcome in other places.
Yeah. Yeah. Saying where conventional wisdom is already set is a really diplomatic way of saying old white guys run the show. We're just,
Look, I didn't say it, you did.
I said it. Yeah, yeah, no, that's a fantastic perspective, and I think there's overlapping aspects of past guests that have given their own perspective on it, and I see one of the greatest benefits being, for better or worse, and I think multicultural communities are only good things,
Mm.
but even like whatever your cultural background is, like even if you're Italian, maybe you want an Italian lawyer, like
Mhm.
you want a lawyer who looks like you.
Yeah.
And I think that, the benefit of women and attorneys of color doing these innovative, more accessibly priced law firm models means that now so many communities that have gone so long unserved by the legal profession, whether it's being priced out or just they don't look like me and I don't trust them, because you
Mhm.
talked about trust before, right?
Mhm.
Now there are lawyers that look like me and I could trust them, even if it's just, a cultural gut thing,
Mhm.
they're going to get legal services now. And I think that that's a good thing. And there's a huge market for that. And you can make money doing that, even charging low prices. So why not? And so at the end of the day, I still think it's just a good thing. And like I haven't said this in a long time, so newer listeners wouldn't have heard it. But there's a book, I think it's Outliers by Malcolm Gladwell. And he talks about how back in the day, I know like Jewish lawyer is a thing now, right? But like back in the day, Jews weren't allowed to be at the white glove law firms. So they had no other choice but to go and start their own law firms if they went to law school. And then it just turned out those practice areas ended up being really important in a technologically advancing and changing society,
Wow.
right? And so like it's a similar kind of a thing where if you know right now the women attorneys and attorneys of color doing things innovative in law, that's going to be the next big thing. And we're at the cusp of it right now. And so the only people who stand to lose are those who don't adapt because the current system is working for them.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think so that's a neat bit of history that I never knew. And it puts a lot of things into perspective. I feel like that's why it's so important to kind of ask why. And especially in our profession, I think that sometimes we as attorneys, we don't ask why enough to sort of understand why are things the way that they are now. And that really opens up our perspective and ability to challenge the way things are and create new paradigms. And, but I do think, if I don't know if you've got a crystal ball, behind you somewhere, but I think that you're onto something about I think that you're onto something about, what the future looks like, the future of the profession in terms of, I think the new frontier is really figuring out how do you provide legal services and solutions that meet the needs of everyday people because there's this latent market that's out here and the folks who can capitalize on that are going to really just shift the way that people think about working with lawyers and what that can look like. So, I'm on board with you on that.
Yeah. So there's no easy way to pivot to my last question, but we'll just do it, Zane. And that is a hot dog a sandwich and why?
No, a hot dog is definitely not a sandwich. I understand why someone would think that it might be a sandwich, but sometimes, as with everything, there are some things that just don't follow or fall into the rules. And a hot dog, even though it's meat between, a piece of bread, maybe that's why, maybe it's just because it's one piece of bread instead of two pieces of bread. But to me, well, I mean, I guess you could say that with a sub or a hoagie too. But you can't explain it with logic. It's not a sandwich.
So I've been able to ask this question a lot lately because I've been interviewing a lot of people in and or around Philly. Then a rare follow-up question, is a Philly cheesesteak a sandwich?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
That's on like a sub sometimes, right? So like that's
Um,
there's no
it's
separation.
it's always on a sub, so like I said, I'm not gonna try to explain it logically. Some things just defy logic, and one of those is a hot dog. For some reason, it's not a sandwich, and I'm sticking to it.
If people wanted to get in touch with you, Zane, what's the best way for them to do that?
So the best way would be either through LinkedIn or if you want to hit me up over email. So I'm on LinkedIn as m.zane, Zane Johnson on LinkedIn. And then I am, my email is johnson@mza.legal. So feel free to reach out at any point. Also feel free to check out our website, mza.legal. And I'm available, happy to have conversations. I love talking with other attorneys and other folks who are trying to build new things. And so, feel free to reach out at any point if that conversation could be helpful.
Zane Johnson, thanks so much for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me.
And that's our show. Thanks again to 650 and Gavel for being sponsors. The best way for others to discover this show is for you to share it with somebody you think would find value from it. Follow me on LinkedIn since that's where I'm most active on social media, and click the bell towards the top right of my profile to get notified about all of my posts about this podcast and everything else I think is valuable for you to see. To get in touch, message me on LinkedIn or email kurbis@lawsubscribed.com. All links are in the show notes. Until next time, this is Matthew Kurbis with Law Subscribed.